Hello and welcome to Suzi's Book Bag, hosted by me, Suzi Fay. Hello if you're coming back to us and you've seen what we do before, and also hello if this is your first time in the Book Bag. In either case, if you wouldn't mind just hitting the subscribe button, it's always nice to see those numbers go up. And we've got a great interviewee for you today. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Travis Elborough. He's a pop cultural historian and author who's written books about parks and buses and vinyl. He's a music critic. He's all over cultural London, honestly, doing events and all kinds of exciting things. But his latest book is about glasses, spectacles, goggles. It's for specky four eyes everywhere, and I don't wear them during these episodes, but I am a proud specky four eyes myself. So his new book, Through the Looking Glasses, is just out in paperback. It's come from Abacus, which is why I have chosen an Abacus bag to kick things off today. So welcome. Travis Elborough.
Thank you, Suzi. Pleasure to be here.
Now, I think all your enthusiasms and all the books that you write do come from things that you're personally passionate about. But was this especially so? I mean, glasses have played a part in your life since you were pretty small, haven't they?
They have, yes. I mean, it was a couple of things that triggered off my interest in digging into the research to write the book. Is that I'd aged into having varifocal glasses. I'd tried to put that off for as long as possible because varifocal lenses are not cheap. And when I was having my eye test for that, and they were saying, no, you really have to get varifocals. And it was doing the thing that lots of people do when you get a bit older, which is moving bits of paper further away from yourself to be able to see things, and taking my glasses off to read rather than putting them on. And they also spotted some sort of weird thing in the back of my eyeball. So there was a possibility that I was developing glaucoma. So I was sent for lots of tests for that. And in the end, that proved to be negative, which was great. But it just made me question really my own reliance on this face furniture that I've had, on my face, obviously, where else is it going to be? At the end of my nose, sitting on the end of my nose for, since I was about 8 or 9. And that fear in a way that I might be beyond sight, they might lose my sight, again, brought me up sharp, just thinking about how much I relied on glasses. And also, as a professional writer who spends most of their time reading, looking at stuff, the idea of that going or it deteriorating in some degree and being without it, just made me wonder, in a way, sort of marvel actually about how amazing glasses are. But again, before I started researching the book, I didn't really know much about them. I didn't know when they'd been invented. I didn't really know all that much about the difference in lens types, or it was almost something you just turn up, have an eye test, given a piece of paper with some numbers on it, and then you wander off and get them made up and then pick them up, put them on for a bit, wonder whether they're the right ones, and then after about a day or two you're fine, and off you go into the world with them again. And glasses are, it's a clunky phrase I've used before, but glasses are both how I look in the sense of they're how I see, but they're also how I look is intrinsically part of what I look like. I mean, only my wife sees me without them. When I go to sleep, so they're on most all day, every day.
I'll just do a little show and tell here. I don't know if I'll get this right, but that's me. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's me as a student, and I'm wearing pretty huge glasses there, huge shiny glasses. And I've noticed over the years that my frames have got narrower, and you don't need to wear such huge goggles anymore, do you?
Well, no, but one of the effects of COVID, or post effects of COVID, there were quite a few pieces about having stronger and bolder and more interesting glasses. Looked good on Zoom and other social meeting platforms are available. But that again, how fashion intrudes in how we see each other and communicate and so on. But you'll be all right. I mean, one of the trends for the reason why in the 1980s, big glasses came about, or made big glasses in the late 70s and early 80s, was the development of things like lighter plastic lenses. So you could have a bigger style of glasses and frame, but with a lighter lens, right? And so it wasn't so heavy on the face. And the whole thing about glasses is that we are having something that's actually comfortable, that's not too intrusive. Though obviously in the history of glasses, having these things on your face at all is often considered by other people to be an affront to normality or social conditions, and particularly for women, the idea of women in glasses. I mean, there's a great quote I came across, some sort of guide to eyesight, and it says glasses for young women are particularly disfiguring, and that kind of continues into the whole stereotype of the spinster. There's a novel from the 1920s by Winifred Holtby, which is called the Rector's Daughter, and the main character is described as a decline who hides her eyes behind hideous glasses, as if it's sort of doubly damning that she's both a spinster and wears glasses. But it becomes quite stereotypical at that point, the idea of the blue stocking, the brainy woman who's on the shelf and unmarried in the interwar period. I mean, there are whole articles about the problem of surplus women in papers such as the Daily Mail. I can't remember exactly the Daily Mail, but the Express or something similar of that era.
Well, let's go right back to the beginning, shall we? Because it is a fascinating story. I think this is what you specialize in, taking something that we don't think about whatsoever, put it on our nose and we're good to go. And actually, it's a very intricate story. So let's go way back. Optical devices. When can we trace them back to?
Well, I mean, it's curiously that the Romans and the Greeks certainly knew something about optics, and they certainly used glass, and the Romans very adept at glass making. So people like Seneca and Pliny observed that by putting water into a vase or something, that it has an optical effect. I mean, even earlier than that, there's tales that it's a little bit complicated about Nero watching gladiatorial conquests with the aid of some green emerald or a green glass and holding it up. But we don't know whether that was just a soothing thing, because there are in kind of Roman medicine the idea of certain crystals or whatever having certain properties, and green, supposedly being imbued with a liquidity somehow or other that would help your eyes. It permeates through, and in Chinese medicine too, that runs through. But really, it's not until the medieval period that we have proper evidence of a pair of spectacles. I mean, there are things like reading stones and magnifying things which sort of float around that period too. But one of the big problems in a way is that no one can work out how the eye actually works, or certainly this is an impediment to people developing spectacles. With the Romans, apparently as well, there's a very good sort of academic article arguing that part of the reason why spectacles were never invented really, or it was unnecessary, was there was a whole system of scribes, factotums and so on. So when people aged and their eyesight deteriorated, there was always some young scribe or a slave on hand to take down notes. And actually Pliny, when he dies, inhaling the fumes from the Vesuvius, is reciting his last words to a scribe. But it means in a way that there's such a bureaucratic system that it just doesn't occur to, or seemingly it doesn't. Well, obviously it didn't. As far as we know, it didn't occur to them. The other thing is there's what's known as intramissionary and extramissionary theories of how the eyes work. Plato is a big advocate, and Galen, many of the big medical figures in sort of Roman and Greek history, were fans of the extramissionary theory, which is a bit like the Austin Powers of laser beams from your sharp eyes. The idea is that light goes out into the world and it apprehends the world. And this theory, Leonardo da Vinci is still entertaining it, so it hangs around for quite some time. And then the other theory, which Aristotle advocates, is the intermissionary one, which is the one where the light, we know how it works now, which is that light comes into your eyes. And because of this philosophical debate, it means really that spectacle making, it comes from the world of craft, as far as we can tell. The earliest known reference we actually have to a pair of spectacles comes in a Lenten sermon, which is delivered in 1306 in Florence by a Dominican brother called Father Giordano. And it's a throwaway line. He literally, we have the text from this particular sermon, and he effectively says, isn't it great we've got these spectacles? They're wonderful, aren't they? And the Dominicans were at the forefront of, in a way, they believed in sort of godly scientific knowledge. One of their emblems is a dog with a torch in its mouth. So they're forward-looking and believe that knowledge enhances spiritual experience and so on. So anyway, he says, isn't it great we've got these glasses, these spectacles? I met the bloke who invented them in Pisa 20 years ago, which, if that's true, puts the first date of the spectacles back to 1286. And that's the earliest reference we have for them. We don't know, they possibly could have existed earlier, and we still don't to this day know who the bloke in Pisa that Giordano claimed invented them was, or if he even existed. There were rival claims in Venice and in Florence itself, but that's the earliest record we have for them. And they would have been what's known as rivet spectacles. So they would have been made out of wood or animal bone, and two circular discs with a kind of like a hook thing really at the top, and then just bolted together. And they would have just been popped on the nose, just floating around on the nose. They would have had convex lenses, because these are the first types which are to treat long-sightedness, or the condition which is known as presbyopia, which essentially means that your eyes can no longer accommodate to the same degree. And we don't get concave lenses for short-sightedness until the 1450s. So it takes some time. And there are kind of good reasons why that might be the case. For one thing, society is still largely illiterate, and also if you're long-sighted, at that time also there are far fewer people who are short-sighted. To get to age into having presbyopia, you've got to live until about 40s or 50s, and while death rates are, people did live. If they lived for long enough to have that happen to them, rather than if they died of the plague or whatever else. But in a sort of military society, in a way, or you being able to see far away, but then being able to kind of scrunch your eyes up so you can see close, you can get by, really. It's not that urgent. And in any way, so we know that they had glasses for long sight in the 13th, 14th century. And they were, these were great boons to monkish scholars who would be able to continue illuminating manuscripts. And because of that, because they're immediately associated with knowledge, some of the earliest iconography we have of glasses tends to be of the saintly. The first actual painting we have of a pair of glasses dates from about 1350s. And it's by a man called Tommaso de Moderna, and it's in a monastery in Treviso, which is sort of just outside Venice. And it is essentially of Hugh of St. Cher, who's the indexer of the Bible. So he is depicted with his glasses on, with a book, doing God's work on, alphabetizing the Bible. And so that thing of the scholarly and the godly. A famous subject who's often painted with spectacles is St. Jerome, who is the translator of the Bible into Vulgar Latin. And he died in about 420 AD, so at least about 800 years before we know the first spectacles. But he's often shown with glasses. So glasses have this thing about being brainy, they're godly-ish, they're saintly at least, and scholarly, and those three things percolate, the representations of glasses throughout history. But on the other hand, there's another school of thought that thinks that glasses are, you have your God-given vision, and
they're going against nature.
Against nature. And then very quickly also, because glasses are worn by people doing accounting, or there's a theory of in a way that you're seeing more than you should, so they become associated with miserliness and moneylenders, and also deception. It's an idea that you're because you're seeing more than you should. It's deceitful. And there's a great American phrase from the 20th, slang phrase for glasses, which bizarrely, maybe bizarrely not, P.G. Wodehouse is the first person recorded as using it in print, which is cheaters. Glasses are called cheaters, like as in a wind cheater. So there's an idea that, again, that you're getting more than you should, or there's something dubious and deceptive. And and as I was alluding to a bit earlier on about women, those things collide with. That women are seeing more than they should. They're looking into men's business in some way or other. They're seeing more than they should. And then there's the other element that the glasses disguise your features. So there are famous Flemish paintings of jesters clutching, pairs of spectacles. So this idea of mockery as well, and that can then feed into glasses as being, funny, but being, people wearing glasses are amusing in some way, whether, and have not being able to see is amusing in some way or other.
Yes, you've read lots of books, turned over lots of books with characters who are wearing glasses. It becomes thematic in, is it Raymond Chandler, where yes, it's sneaky women. I mean, they're disguising how they look. They're maybe trying to look more vulnerable than they in fact are. Yeah. And they're also peering into things. So it's all that.
I mean, there's Chandler's 1949 novel, The Little Sister, is a classic example. There's a mousy little sister who turns up in his office. He's wearing, these cheaters. Bizarrely, for Marlowe gives some reasonable advice on what is a contemporary style of glasses that she should get. And so when he encounters her later, she's wearing these more kind of cat's eye style, more attractive cat's eye style of spectacle, which is interesting to have Marlowe. He's normally associated with glasses being filled with bourbon than eyewear. But Chandler, and one of the really fascinating things that I didn't turn it up, but it is that Strangers on a Train, Patricia Highsmith's debut novel, which is famously filmed by Alfred Hitchcock in a marvelous adaptation. One of the things is in the novel itself, the character of Miriam, who plays the scheming ex-wife, doesn't actually have glasses in the novel. There's no mention of having glasses. And Raymond Chandler was initially hired to do the screenplay on Strangers on a Train. Hitchcock apparently dumped the script and they fell out rather badly. But I sort of had an email exchange with Andrew Wilson, who's Highsmith's biographer, to try and find out who had added the spectacles to the script. And I didn't reach any conclusion. But somewhere in between Highsmith's novel and it arriving at Hitchcock and Chandler writing the script, Miriam is given these glasses, and they're supposed to. There's a script note in the script about how they emphasize her piggy, greedy nature in some way or other. So it's there's most of the apart from the scholarliness, but even that becomes mockable, tend to be fairly pejorative. There's some interesting counterexamples though. The first account we have of spectacles for short-sightedness with concave lenses comes from some ducal documents in Florence. So they're being gifted as quite high-end items. And in Spain, almost solely in Europe, seemingly, the wearing of very large spectacles tied to the head with string, interestingly, becomes very fashionable and becomes very fashionable for women. But that's quite an anomaly. Not only is the string tying it to your head business anomalous to Spain and possibly China as well, that they tended to tie their spectacles to their heads too. But the idea of them being fashionable for women is, I mean, there are phases when glasses go in and out of fashion, but that's one of the earliest examples of it, becoming a very aristocratic thing to be seen wearing, these large glasses.
The whole concept of the hooks that go over your ears is extraordinarily late in history. I learned that from your book.
And the earliest case we can have is between 1720 odd and 1729, and there's a rival claim from France, but the person in Britain and most of the sort of Anglo-American world that's credited with it is a man called Edward Scarlett, who is a spectacle maker in Soho in London, and he invents his spectacles with they're called side pieces or sides, and they're actually they're called wig spectacles, because although they have things that go over the ears, the side pieces are mainly to have spikes, sometimes have spikes on them, sometimes have hooks around the back to be in place. So it's 1729 before suddenly people realised that ears could be a useful thing to prop your glasses up. And even then, it's a bit of a delayed thing, because actually the ear bits are going into your wig more than they're going behind your ears. But yeah, there are also sort of earlier contraptions with glasses being tied to people's hats and and other very odd things. But until that point, yes, they're just, you have to prop them on your nose, and it takes that long. And then just as that's been discovered, suddenly the lorgnette and the pince-nez come along, sort of dispensing with the side pieces again. But again, that some of that's about class and about the liberty to be able to do without your glasses. In post-revolutionary France, the idea of wafting around with a pair of glasses on a stick, effectively, which is what the lorgnette is about, becomes quite fashionable, and becomes, think of it using them a bit like a fan. It becomes a slightly coquettish thing, and and it's about it's still about sneaking a glance, about the slight, putting them on, observing, and putting them out. And the thing called the quizzing glass, which is largely tends to be a kind of single lens on a stick. And there's I found there's account from Disraeli's diary, I think it is, where he takes his quizzing glass to some event with Queen Victoria, and is shamed for using it to look at the monarch, and has to kind of hide the quizzing glass after that. And the quizzing glass in a way also gives rise to the monocle, the single thing on a string, which, I mean, we tend to associate them with the First World War German army colonels with spike helmets, but it's long associated with the English aristocracy and upper class, and it actually in America in the 1910s becomes fashionable, and a fashionable affectation among young women. And in Paris in the 1920s, there's a lesbian bar called the Monocle, where the women dress in slightly butch clothing, including a monocle.
Mm-hmm. And to go back to literary figures, I think you found some anomalies in the case of Miss Marple.
Yeah.
What's her site, actually? I mean, obviously her mental sight is clear as anything.
Yeah,
but we're not quite sure what's happening with her eyes.
Yes, it varies a lot. In Murder in the Vicarage, which is the first Marple novel, the narrator who's vicar of the murder happens in, it says she has the only glasses she has are for looking at birds, either binoculars or he surmises for spying on the villagers. So at that point she isn't wearing glasses. And it varies from book to book, essentially. I mean, she was knocking these things out, obviously, while I was knocking out Hercule Poirot once. And I think there's Bertram's Hotel, which is one of the later novels from the 1960s. It's revealed that Marple is about 70 at that point, which, if you track it back to when Murder in the Vicarage occurs, actually means that she's roughly the same age as Christie herself. And so when Christie started writing, which didn't wear them anyway. Whereas as she's obviously aging, she probably finds she does need glasses. So there are references to her in later books of her going to the optometrist and so on. And then the next book, her eyes are fine again, and there's no mention of glasses. So it just, and so, I pose the question in a way that it's, part of it's also that in the television adaptations that she's shown, with various actors playing her with half moon glasses or and so on. So they in the same way that depictions of Sherlock Holmes with his magnifying glass and his pipe and his deerstalker, very little of which are actually in the novels of Conan Doyle. And Conan Doyle was interesting as well. He's using the word interesting. Sorry, apologies for that repetition of that word. I find it interesting anyway. But that Conan Doyle himself trained as an eye doctor as well as playing golf for Southsea, and writing his Sherlock Holmes stories in spare time. But he'd already published his first Holmes stories when he went to Austria to study to become an eye doctor, and he comes back and sets up premises on Harley Street, but the business doesn't take up, and then there's the Strand demand more Holmes stories, and the rest, as I say, is history. But Holmes, again, there's the case of the adventure of the golden pince nez, an early 20th century short story which involves Russian anarchists, and someone's found dead clutching this pair of gold pince nez, also Whose Body, the first Lord Peter Wimsey novel, also has a character who's found naked apart from a pair of pince nez. And again, this is the whole thing of the detective, the person who can see more than anyone else, is built into the idea of spectacles in that way.
Who is that behind you, by the way? You have provided an illustration.
Yeah, it's a Freddie Garrity of Freddie and the Dreamers. The sort of Manchester / Mersey. Well, they were a Manchester band, but somewhat on the coattails of the Mersey beat phenomena. But he always did a strange dancing motion while singing, and wore these types of glasses. So the idea of pop stars in glasses, well, people like Buddy Holly. Got also down here the Trevor Horn, the Buggles.
He turned himself into a Buggle by donning huge glasses.
Bo Diddley and so on. So there are a few down here. I won't go through them all, but otherwise we'll be all day. But yes, there's something you'd think something intrinsically not very rock and roll about wearing spectacles, and certainly someone like John Lennon, who describes that he thought he was given glasses about the age of 8, and said he thought wearing glasses, his phrase of the period, was sissy, and so tried as hard as possible not to wear them. And then when Buddy Holly arrives, Buddy Holly is encouraged in his glasses to get even bolder and bigger glasses by the Everly brothers. Interestingly, there's that word again. Interestingly, sorry. Because the Everly brothers take Buddy Holly and the Cricket somewhat under their wing, because they were sort of child stars who'd gone up through the ranks. So they take Buddy Holly and stuff to their sort of Ivy League outfitter in New York and get them kitted out and so on. And Holly himself had also tried contact lenses without success. And there's interestingly, I think his first album, the cover over here, has him without glasses on. And it looks almost unrecognizable without them. But this, and Hank Marvin was told, to take his glasses off. And Lennon, really, it's once he stars in How I Won the War, the Dick Lester film, where he's Musketeer Gripewood, I think Gripeweed is his name, and he's given the sort of round National Health glasses, the little wiry ones. And a shorter haircut, and after he's done that film, the glasses stay ever after. And it's a point when the Beatles are also moving from being a live performing band to moving into the studio and becoming a much more serious about it. So the donning of the glasses at that juncture is also offers a fascinating element of the persona of the Beatles as they would go on, as this studio bound, producing art rather than necessarily, throwaway 3-minute singles. Not that the throwaway singles aren't art, but it seems a telling moment that's when and also when he becomes more radical and political, and the round wire glasses, have a certain
It sounds almost as if he would almost have been pushed on stage when he was, in the Fab Four with the mop tops. I mean, it sounds like he really had very poor vision and was just, looking out dimly at a sea of people he couldn't
yeah,
really
I mean,
see.
in some respects he found it both terrifying, but other people have done the reverse. I mean, Harry Seacombe, for example, the Goons.
You're covering it all here.
He needed glasses, but didn't wear them on stage because he actually got confidence in not wearing the glasses, not being able to see, gave him the boon in a way to be able to perform when he was quite shy. Nana Mouskouri, the opposite. Nana Mouskouri felt naked without her glasses, and she was often, again, as a woman, told, I think she was sacked from one job for appearing on stage, in a nightclub by wearing her glasses. So and under the ground, the punters don't want to see that, like this woman in glasses singing, but she felt much more confident in her glasses, and again, felt that it gave her the strength to go on stage and confront sort of audiences. So it can go either way, I think, depending on what state you're in. But with Lennon, I do think it's interesting that they've stopped playing live by the time he puts them on, so he doesn't even have to consider confronting them in that way. But he does write about being terrified of not being able to see the audience, or certainly said that in interviews anyway, or found it terrifying in lots of respects. But just because it's just so disarming, isn't it? Really, you can't work out what's going on, what might be coming at you. Particularly with the Beatles, where probably stuff was thrown at them, and they were being screamed at, and so physically very disorientating, of not being able to hear yourself play and then not being able to see who you're playing to, So yeah.
And then there's another famous pop specs where Morrissey, who made a big play really of all those kind of ideas that they were nerdy and a bit feeble, he kind of turned it all into positives.
He did, but he actually didn't wear them that often. He did wear contact lenses as well. There's a great interview where he says, we should have been sponsored by other bands are sponsored by Levi's. We should have been sponsored by an opticians. And then Kylie Minogue now has a range of spectacles bearing her name. So maybe it was just too ahead of its time as an idea. But yes, Morrissey appearing on top of the box with his big National Health glasses and a hearing aid and his gladioli, which became adopted by his fans, and and it means also his fans feel less they're not embarrassed or ashamed of wearing glasses. It gives them the confidence to do it. And even people who didn't need, I think he jokes that there are even people wandering around at his concerts wearing glasses, don't need to, bumping into the walls and so on, presumably because they haven't got clear lenses. But you could buy Urban Outfitters, a few years ago, was certainly still selling, black horn-rimmed type glasses with clear lenses for those who wanted to get the look of being a bespectacled wearer, being bespectacled.
There's quite a history of that as well. Again, I didn't know until I read your book, but was it Harold Lloyd who didn't need...
He didn't need glasses. No, Harold Lloyd, he had a character before, which was called a silent character before, called Lonesome Luke. And Lonesome Luke is a pretty poor rip-off of Charlie Chaplin, except he wears too tight clothing in the way that Chaplin wore too loose clothing. And the Lonesome Luke was actually doing quite well. It wasn't a flop. It was a reasonably successful character. For some reason or other, Lloyd himself didn't particularly like it and wanted to break out and do something else. And he alights on a pair of spectacles. Actually, he tries on a few pairs of spectacles, but I think at least 3. But he buys a pair of these round Zill, i.e. plastic glasses, from an optical shop in Spring Street in Los Angeles, which is actually the financial district of Los Angeles at that time anyway. And it's part of a persona he adopts. He calls him the Glasses character. He's first unveiled in 1917. And he is in a way, a boy next door. He's a modern. I mean, wearing the plastic glasses. It's a modern look he's going for. And actually, in This Side of Paradise, F. Scott Fitzgerald's debut novel, there's a description of a college boy type who's called the slicker. And what the slickers do, they have their hair slicked back and they have big owlish glasses that they wear rather effectively. And Lloyd is in that figure. He's the boy next door. He obviously will play college students and so on. The really interesting thing about, sorry, that word again, about Lloyd is that his eyesight's not the joke. Normally, in most comedy, think of Mr. Magoo, for example, that cartoon character. The whole point is that Mr. Magoo can't see, and the joke is that he always bumps into stuff and can't see anything. In Lloyd's case, the glasses stay on regardless of what he's doing, so he can be playing American football and he's still got his glasses on. He can be a lifeguard, he can be in the Civil War and so on. So the glasses, the joke isn't that he can't see, but the joke in a way is that there's a slight incongruousness of some of the situations he's placed in as an American football player. Because there are baseball, there are actually quite a lot of famous baseball players and cricketers who wore glasses, but American football and also association football over here, there's not. You have to wear contact lenses if you're going to do that, because you get bashed around and the glasses will fall off and so on. So Lloyd, and later comedians like Woody Allen, for example, similarly. In Life and Death, he's in the Napoleonic period, but he's still got a pair of 1970s glasses on, and also in sort of Carry On films, Charles Hawtrey. It could be the Roman emperor, it could be the Tudor period, and Hawtrey has still got his little round glasses on. So that's the comic effect. But in comedy also, we think of things like the Two Ronnies. What they're mocking usually when they did the newsreader sketch, and the two pairs of glasses would be in the title sequence for the program, is the seriousness, that newsreaders, there's footage, I think, of Walter Cronkite when he learns of the Kennedy assassination. It's handed to him. He has to puts the glasses on to read the telegram to announce it. It's that kind of seriousness that that you mean business by putting your glasses on, because I'm going to deliver this message, that things like the Two Ronnies are mocking with their sporting of those glasses, because they look serious because they've got these heavy dark glasses on, but they're delivering silly versions of the news and so on. So that play on the seriousness and that being a comic element.
And Bret Easton Ellis in American Psycho, his character Patrick Bateman, he's got quite a lot to say about, but he's got a lot to say about branding of all sorts.
Yes, so he wears Oliver's, I think they're walnut Oliver People, no, redwood actually, they're redwood Oliver People's spectacles. Now, when the novel was written and then subsequently published what, 1990, 91, I think, Oliver's People hadn't actually been around that long. I think the firm was established in 86 or 87 in Los Angeles, in quite a glamorous district with quite a few Hollywood restaurants and so on. And their original stock and the name came from, they basically found all this whole pile of dead stock from American optical stuff from the 40s and 50s. And they set up shop with all of this dead stock, and it sold so fast that they then created their own styles in the mode of. And I argue in the book it's a little bit like the Levi 501s, which also enjoy a revival in that period. It's a sort of classic, something like what Gregory Peck is wearing in To Kill a Mockingbird is quite a Oliver People style of glasses from that era. And Bateman wears them, but he wears them with clear lenses. And there's a business meeting where about three of them around the table have all got these Oliver People's glasses on. But again, it's obsession with branding. And obviously in the 1980s, that was when designer glasses were becoming a thing. I mean, it existed before people had put their names to glasses. Christian Dior did it in 1968. But people like Gloria Vanderbilt in the late 70s is one of the first people to have a brand, like a celebrity endorsed pair of spectacles in the late 70s. So the era of designer glasses begins roughly then. I mean, it's existed before. I mean, in England, it's a bit more complicated because we had the NHS system until deregulation in the 1980s. And because of the NHS range and so on. And one of the interesting stories is that Weissmans, who are a big manufacturer of glasses for the NHS, after the privatisation, rebrand themselves and the round John Lennon style glasses, which they're style called Windsor, roughly, which are American Optical, a launch actually in 1917. The name is important in a way because that's when America enters the First World War. And Windsor obviously is what the royal family changed their name to during the First World War. So it's a slightly patriotic thing. And there's, in the advertising, they nod to kind of English genteel heritage. There's like a picture of the castle on some adverts for the Windsor glasses and so on. But the Windsor style, when Weissman and co go over into the private, they're branded Savile Row eyewear. So whereas the Alga works are actually in Hackney Wick, or they were there in the same building in Hackney Wick from 1932-33 until about last year when it finally closed down, which is rather sad. The continuity has gone. But the Savile Row eyewear is the sell the rolled gold round type of spectacle that the likes of John Lennon and various other people, myself included, at one point used to wear.
Well, I think I must have had some NHS specs at one point because in reading this book, I didn't remember the glasses, but I remembered the case. You described the case, and I thought I had one with the click, that would take a fingernail off if you weren't careful.
Yes, I mean the classic cases, that and there's an element where most NHS glasses are issued with this cloth-covered tin case with the spring loading on it, and in a way that makes sense because the government is contributing to NHS glasses. So the idea you present them in as sturdy a case as possible to protect them from damage makes economic sense from a public policy point of view. So it's sort of tied in with that to a certain extent. But my memory of having them on the desk at school in front of you, with next to the pencil case and everything else. It's just part of the accoutrements of my adolescent life, really. So.
Exactly. You have done a lot of research into advertising. I mean, advertising proved quite fruitful as a topic for you because you can learn a lot about attitudes from advertising, can't you?
Yeah. I mean, but in England too, once the NHS came in, you couldn't really advertise. There were lots of restrictions on what opticians could display, prices, etc. I mean, there were ways of getting around this, like educational films that would be screened, but you couldn't have an advert like you would have now for a type of spectacles in a mainstream newspaper. You could advertise in trade journals and things, in part because there was a disincentive for people to bump up the bill for the NHS spectacle if too many people wanted these things. But yeah, in America particularly, I mean, American Optical published their own magazine, kind of pressing. They also made promotional films. There was a promotional film which was about involved a car crash, and the idea was that the driver hadn't had their eyes tested properly and so on, and obviously that becomes a thing actually in the shortly after the First World War. They start introducing eye tests for people driving as part of the test. But American Optical, very far ahead, and it's the associations as well of glasses which are specifically marketed at women, and also marketed in terms of sports. So there are golfing glasses or glass. I mean, one of the the transformations of the 20th century really is the arrival of sunglasses as a cool thing, as a desirable, stylish thing to wear. Because really, before the 20th century, if you're wearing tinted lenses, that usually means you've got something wrong with your eyes. And they're vogue for having tinted lenses. Pepys, for example, buys a pair of glasses which have blue or green lenses, and it's blue actually. And Benjamin Martin's margins had violet lenses in them and stuff in the 18th century. But normally if you're wearing tinted glasses, it's to hide something that might be wrong with your eyes, or because your eyes are very, very sensitive. And it's not until it's William Crookes who invents the cathode ray tube and is a spiritualist who's trying to develop a lens initially to protect people welding, but he comes up with one of the first versions of an anti-UV ray type of lens, which is licensed to American Optical in the States. But obviously at this time, rather like the Harold Lloyd scenario, Harold Lloyd's glasses are made of plastic. He is performing on celluloid, a form of plastic in the films. But Hollywood has gone to, the American film industry has gone west to Hollywood, where it's sunny and bright, and you suddenly got this whole generation of famous stars who have reasons to wear glasses because they're hiding from the sun, but also to hide their appearances, wearing sunglasses, after dark, to appear incognito and so on. So sunglasses then become, and also because they're associated with speed and glamour, in a way that we have once motorized transport comes on, you need goggles to protect your eyes. So there's a type of glasses which is associated, and when you're flying a plane, and so those things, the idea of wearing protective goggles, but it's about sport, or it's about adventure, or it's about flying or driving, twists and morphs into things like the Aviator sunglasses, which come from they're developed by Bausch and Loeb for American Army test pilots who are flying higher into the atmosphere and into the bright light, and they then become they're sold then as a sports goal. I mean, Joe Biden, for example, often appears with Aviator sunglasses. They have a military association, and they're precursors to that in glasses that were made with the blued steel as well. Duke of Wellington, for example, his glasses were made of blued steel, and bluing steel is a way of preventing it rusting, and it originally comes from guns. So again, it has a military association. So when you're making it for spectacles, it retains some, maybe only a minor element to it, but I think it definitely, there are consumery guides which say, or etiquette guides from the Victorian period that say, if you really must wear spectacles, then have them of gold or blued steel of the highest quality. So blued steel is seen as a slightly notch above.
So is that the Duke of Wellington, the military Duke of Wellington at the time of Napoleon?
Yes, yeah.
He had a pair of fancy glasses.
He did, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure he was wearing them in about, certainly in later life. Among his possessions are pairs of glasses. Again, people. I was recently the news where when Dominic Raab had resigned, where he was pictured in his car driving, and he had glasses on. And I hadn't seen Rob with a pair of glasses again, because it probably didn't fit with his, was it Tai Chi, karate, whatever martial art thing he did in the boxing, with the glasses doesn't, and Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are occasional glasses wearers, I noticed, the same with Tony Blair as well, and even Jeremy Corbyn before was only occasionally pictured with his glasses. Ronald Reagan is the first American president to wear contact lenses. So again, I mean, but Abraham Lincoln had spectacles. Again, I guess it depends on what kind of authority you're trying. There's an element where probably in the 20th century, again post-war, with someone like Harold Wilson, it's about youth and rigor rather than a paternalistic prime minister who's looking after the good of the nation. In which case, wearing glasses is probably fine. But again, there's lots of semiotics in this, isn't this? What messages we're sending out by wearing or not wearing our glasses, or if we need to wear them, what and the case I quote really early in the book is from childhood for me, was seeing the 1978 Richard Donner adaptation of Superman, or film with Christopher Reeve, and having this sort of dawning realization really that Clark Kent wasn't doing any of the duffing up Lex Luthor stuff. He was bumping into tables and knocking coffees with his spectacles on. And it's, this idea that, in order to prove what a weakling he is, Superman puts on glasses. It's like, pretty damning, isn't it, in a way?
Has a celebrity association ever damaged the sort of cool factor of glasses?
Well, the one shape of frame which I think has been was damaged by this was the aviator spectacle shape. So Gloria Steinem, for example, wears these big gold aviator glasses, and again, this thing is she's a woman, but she's wearing a type of spectacle which originally has a military connection, so it's part of her strength as a figure, and this aviator style of glasses becomes very popular. Even Michael Caine is wearing them by the 70s, and again, this ties in with the jet air boom, and also the disaster movie boom and skyjacking and everything else. But it molds in at this point where being a pilot and wearing a pair of aviators is it's a cool thing. So people like wearing these aviator glasses, and then it becomes quickly associated with like a geeky thing. So Bill Gates in those early photographs of Microsoft was wearing these big aviator glasses, and then in a way, there's an American writer on glasses whose name briefly escapes me, who argues that one of the killers of it was actually Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer, and if we think also, Leslie Nielsen was also on this side of the pond. Dennis Nielsen, yes, and Leslie Nielsen.
Don't drag Leslie Nielsen into this.
With the Muswell Hill murderer. So it's So Dennis Nielsen as well. So somehow or other, what was once about quite a bold feminist person, it then becomes about, it's about pilots and about going places, becomes associated with creepy computer guys and murderers and the geek element. So I think that did for that style for a while. It does seem to come back a little bit in more recent years, but it certainly made it rather unfashionable for a while.
There's a very creepy picture of Nielsen where light is bouncing off his glasses. I think he's been arrested, and it is one of the defining images, and really makes him look sinister.
Yeah,
the glasses help with that.
I should the light is bouncing off my glasses, even though I'm speaking to you, but there's no connection whatsoever, obviously. So.
It's not quite such a sinister thing. No. Now there are alternatives to glasses that you go into in the book. So there's something that intrigued me called the Bates method.
Bates method. Yes, the Bates method was an attempt. I mean, he's a curious character. He disappears and seems to have he's a leading eye doctor in New York, and then he has this mysterious incident where he disappears and then turns up again somewhere else, not really remembering who he is. By then, he's got this whole new idea about how eyes should work, and it's a way of training your eyes, supposedly, completely defunct. But it takes off on the interwar years, and one of the biggest disciples of it is Aldous Huxley, the futuristic science fiction writer of Brave New World and earlier social satires. And he kind of becomes a devotee and writes a book about the Bates methods. I mean, the couple of biographies of Aldous Huxley and interviews with some of his associates from this period, just saying, I mean, because Huxley lost, pretty much went blind and actually learned Braille during a period where he couldn't see. He regained some sight; he could see again, but he could never really see very much. And there are accounts of him like he was just very good at doing the workaround. Really, he would work out where all the rooms, where everything was, so he didn't bump into anything. And someone he was interviewed, one of the biogs said, well, there was one occasion we moved a stool and just walked straight into it. So there's little evidence that it works. It's completely debunked. But for a time it was huge, and it was huge in Hollywood as well, which is partly where Huxley encountered it. as well, because he was out doing script work. But there was a kind of one of the Bates's disciples who set up shop in Los Angeles and treated various celebrity types. And, I mean, Reagan is interesting. He wears contact lenses quite early once they're available, because he begins in radio. And actually, when he appears testifying in the House of Un-American Activities Committee to dob in his contemporaries as being communists, he wears his glasses for that particular exchange, probably because again he wants to perhaps appear more serious than he would in his Bonzo movies or whatever else, wrestling with chimpanzees. So yeah, it's that Bates method was an attempt to cure eyesight by doing different forms of muscle. I mean, it comes into it's first published in sort of Physical Culture or one of those types of these new breed of self-help exercise magazines that in the post-First World War years become a very thing, because after the First World War, obviously, and then the global flu pandemic, the obsession in a way with health and rigor and exercise after the horrors of the First World War, and Bates's method fits in with, and that slight self-improvement thing as well, the actualization thing that comes in.
I started to wince a bit when I was reading about the early years of contact lenses. And it really made me think, for all the things that we take for granted nowadays, there are some people who have been incredibly brave in the past in trying out things. So the whole thing about putting bits of glass in your eyes, terrifying.
I mean, it's really relatively late that the idea of plastic and pliable plastic, and again, it comes partly from dentistry. It came from things that we use to measure eyes with dentistry, and that having to plumb up, to do fillings essentially. There's an adjunct of that, and it led to the eventual. I mean, it's a very long process. I mean, theoretically, the idea of contact lenses had been understood, the idea of putting a small lens, but yeah, you really were just putting a lump of glass on your on your eye until late until to the tail end of the 20th century, really. So I mean, the mass market disposable contact lenses don't arrive until the 1980s. So yeah, and I mean, I've never worn them myself. My wife wears them, contact lenses, but I had an astigmatism, so I think when I was growing up, it was quite complicated to get contact lenses that worked at that time, or they certainly if they existed, they were very expensive. And again, I've become so acclimatized to wearing my spectacles that I just don't. And also, I do watch my wife occasionally screaming as she tries to put like the lens in, or it's gone wrong. So I just think, I can probably do without that. Really, just stick these things on the face; it's fine.
I remember hard ones, which I think probably aren't used anymore, but they could really damage your eyes.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to read that people had ones that they slept in, which isn't recommended even today.
No,
so
I mean, it's just I mean, your eyes are incredibly delicate things. You don't want to really mess with them too much. But we are at an interesting juncture. I mean, several optometrists and like that I interviewed for the book talked very optimistically about where that we could be moving into a glassesless future, in terms that there are eye drops which, if given early enough, can prevent developing short-sightedness, and obviously there are operations to laser surgery and also replacement of lenses, so that presbyopia and later eye conditions can be arrested. We're not quite there yet, but those things are, there's people. I mean, again, it's very unevenly spread. There are obviously parts of the world where bad eyesight and inadequate access to eyewear and eye corrective glasses or whatever is very scarce. But the means are almost within grasp. So I mean, interesting to think what that would be like. Would people still wear glasses if they didn't need to? In which case, that would be a much more an aesthetic choice. And the whole phenomena of Google, these augmented reality glasses like Google Glass and so on, which fail, for all of some reasons that people think that they're seeing too much because they might be filming them or something. It's a surveillance element to it. and they'll phrase glass holes for those who wore them. But actually, Google Glasses,
glass holes, surely.
it's that was
Glass holes or glass holes, yeah.
Yeah. But they have a practical application, in sort of in medical, uses, putting them on while you might be doing surgery or something or other, and if you can scroll the patient's details up while you're doing that. And in stock checking or doing other forms of work, having the information to hand. And one of the optometrists I spoke to said he just couldn't really understand why everyone was so skeptical about the idea of them. He said, we just think of them. Why can't we think of them more like wearing headphones or something, where you've got this other information coming in orally, rather than, and instead you can have the information coming in, just in front of your eyes through your spectacles. Didn't understand the prejudice in a way. But I think, until people are certain you're not filming them or in some way or other, then I think that produces a degree of doubt. But as I said, that's really an echo of earliest fears, that you're seeing seeing more of someone than you should, or that you're deceiving someone in some way. So it's hundreds of years of similar thoughts about spectacles. We haven't quite escaped early prejudices or early opinions.
Like all those jokes about X-ray glasses that might get you to see people with no clothes on, and that kind of thing. I mean, towards the end of the book, you did find something very intriguing to me, that myopia, is it myopia or the other one, but is really on the up. People are getting more and more myopic.
Yes,
more people are myopic.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One is it's about concentrated looking at screens is not good for us, and also sunlight. I mean, there are various reports that we're living in fear currently of an explosion of myopia because of the pandemic as well. That people were spending all their time indoors, staring at screens, not looking away enough, and in unnatural light. And that can have an effect on becoming more myopic, and and I guess it's also just the intensity of work that we do, looking at stuff now in a way that you would, if you're going back again to an illiterate society where it was just you were hoeing, or you were off hunting, or killing people with the sword or something like that, then
very healthy.
The deep concentration that we do now. And it's particularly one of someone optometrist the other week said it's a lot to do actually the looking, the not looking away, not adjusting your distance as well makes it worse for your eyes. And so we're all spending so much time looking at screens in a way, looking at another form of lens in a way, isn't it? The world is divided between us and it. So there are some concerns about that, but again, hence the optimism about finding down the line some means of arresting that through drops or whatever else. But yes, the myopia is massively increased over the last 50 years or so in comparison. But it was even when I was. I mean, I'm short-sighted, I'm myopic. I can't remember, there is a figure in the book, I can't remember off the top of my head, about how many were myopic when I was born versus now, and it's a much higher when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s anyway.
I feel we should stop looking at screens fairly swiftly now that
we're encouraging this. So this whole program is encouraging them to stare at
danger point. Yeah, everybody's going to be switching off, aren't they? Before I let you go, I will ask you my 3 questions.
Yeah.
So, do you have a favourite artwork connected to
my favourite? Or... Well, actually, it's not a spectacle. I've realised I've made a capital error by not choosing an artwork with a pair of glasses in it, which is a schoolboy error. But when you sent me the questions by email, my initial thought was my favourite piece of art. It's kind of sitting opposite me. I can't show you, unfortunately, but it's the artwork that forms a record cover. So it's the cover by Linda or this co-design. It's Linda Sterling as the artist and the designer is Malcolm Garrett. And Linda Sterling was an artist who emerged during the punk years and in Manchester. And most of her stuff is photo montage or collage. And I grew up, I think, more with pop as or art as pop artifacts, encountering it via record sleeves or book jackets or so on, rather than necessarily seeing it in galleries. We didn't really go to many galleries when I was a child. I spent more time hanging around in Rex watching my dad play football. But it's the cover for Orgasm Addict by Buzzcocks. And it's a picture, and it's a sort of feature of a woman whose head has been replaced by an eye, and there's a pair of sort of eyes where her breasts are. But Linda Sterling, I like the playfulness with which she produces photo montages, and this particular poster, it's a poster of the record sleeve, was actually a wedding gift from a friend. And which only finally had framed about 2 years ago, but it's up in the lounge. But Linda Sterling's work, I mean, there's also, I don't know how familiar people were, but actually the London Tube map will feature a piece of art on the front of it. The 2021 actually features a pair of glasses. But obviously not many people saw that one because, of course, the pandemic meant we were all indoors and not really using the tube.
We didn't go out.
And all the tube maps were sort of like removed for fear of contamination. But this is one of Linda's works, which is called The Bower of Bloom, which was on the cover of the London Tube map. And I like that idea that a piece of art can be on a record sleeve, or could be something that you hold in your hand as you navigate the London underground and overground and whatever else. And so and I like photo montage stuff and pop based artifacts, whether that's Pauline Bote's great stuff, Peter Blake and Jan Howarth's cover for Sgt. Pepper. So I mean, I interviewed Storm Ferguson, the designer of lots of Pink Floyd sleeves. And we talked a lot about how the idea that through these record sleeves you're encountering surreality, references to other paintings and so on. And I think that was music and learning things through music, through the backs of record sleeves or things that were quoted on album covers, or just the design of the album covers, was really where I had my slightly autodidactic education before formally going to university or whatever else, or finding art for yourself. But it came somehow or other via the pages of the inky weeklies, or even Smash Hits. There was a great Smash Hits competition for David Sylvian's Polaroid photographs that he did, these collages they did in the 1980s, where you could win. I think you could win an album and a Polaroid camera itself, or something like that. But the idea of high art concepts, collage, photo montage, folding into pop culture, I like, and I like Linda's stuff. I mean, Linda doesn't just do photo montage; she does performance, and was a musician and performer in her own right as well. But particularly this cover for Orgasm Addict, which has a prime place in our lab. I think technically it's actually hung the wrong way up. The cover is the writing of Buzzcocks is upside down on the actual record sleeve, whereas our poster is the right/wrong way up. But anyway, it still looks great.
It was one of the great things about vinyl, which you've also written about, is that they were big enough for the art to have huge impact. Yeah, so
and the gatefold sleeve as well. So
lyrics, everything that was in the album could be studied.
Definitely, yeah. Alex Stein, we have to thank for that, who's the person at Columbia Records who devised the record sleeve. So, and allowing Pink Floyd to unleash inflatable pigs over Battersea Power Station, and the Sex Pistols to annoy the denizens of Nottingham with ripe Anglo-Saxon words.
So my next question: what's the book that you pretend to have read or wish that you'd got round to reading?
I mean, I seem to have there's almost like a trio of I think we'd call them really sort of Middle European / Russian classics that I own all of these books, but they've sat there on themselves. So Radetzky's March by Joseph Roth, which I've always intended to read. And there's a great book called The Summer Before Dark by Volker Weidemann, which is this group portrait of Irmgard Kuhn, I'm pronouncing it wrong, Stefan Weiss and Joseph Roth in Ostend in 1936, just before obviously the Second World War. And it's a lovely group portrait. And I've read some of Roth's other books, and also Irmgard Kern's book After Midnight is one of the best books about what it's like to be living under Nazism. It's really gets inside the head of it. But the Radetzky's March, Radetzky's Room is Rachel Lichtenstein's fine book, but the Radetzky's March, and also Robert Mussell's The Man Without Qualities, and Vasily Grossman's Life and Fate. These are the three books that sort of haunt me in a way that they're there. I see them and I always think, yes, I really must make time to read those, and then it just doesn't happen for whatever reason. I mean, to be Life and Fate and Man Without Qualities is quite a brick, it has to be said. But the Radetzky's March is reasonably doable. It's not too bad, Michael Hoffman. I've got there's a translation by Michael Hoffman. So I must just steel myself one day and actually read it. I mean, a friend of mine, Kieran Pym, has written
he's just done the biography, which is fabulous.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't read that either yet, but but I feel like I'm sort of circling round bits of Joseph Roth without kind of getting to him himself. Though I have read some Joseph Roth, but it's just I should set some time aside for that one, I think.
And finally, the weirdest piece of feedback you've ever had about your work.
Well, as you said, having written a book about the London bus and vinyl records, I had some fairly strange correspondence over the year from people pointing out things. I think the weirdest bit of feedback I had once was from an editor, which I won't name it, the person that, which was a kind of about comedy, really. And they were pretty much saying, you should just ditch all the history stuff and just try and be funny. And I was like, well, if the books are entertaining, it's because they've got the ballast of history. But I suppose the weirder one I had was a correspondence. This correspondent, someone used to write to me intermittently, anonymously, under the name Xenex, which were very peculiar letters, I have to say. But so I think those are the two or three strange. I did have someone. A huge letter arrived about the bus book, explaining various details and it going into immense detail, all of which was kind of irrelevant, really. It weren't necessarily. They were pretty much just saying, I wouldn't have written it like this. I would have written it like this, which is a mistake which sometimes reviewers will make as well, rather than judging what the book is. It's probably a mistake I've made myself as a reviewer, that you don't judge what's there, you judge what you think ought to be there, or and so on. And sometimes that can be a mistake rather than actually understanding what we've got in front of you.
Yeah, I think it is one of the ways you can muck up certainly a non-fiction review by reviewing the book that's in your head rather than the one that's right in front of you, and you have to be wary about that. Well, I think we should step away from our screens now. After all those warnings, go outside, focus our eyes on different things, look far and near. But I would just say it's such an interesting book. Now out in paperback, it's really fascinating, and it does have that balance of history and humor and pop culture and things that you thought, well, I never knew that. It's really interesting. I'm sure you're working on something just as fascinating now. What is your next project?
I've got a few things. I mean, nothing is set in stone at the moment. So I don't have any kind of bold reveals I can give at the moment, I'm afraid. I mean,
you've got time to read the Radetzky March, then. Yeah,
exactly. Set that aside. I mean, I've got a few projects which are happening, but
bubbling away.
Yeah, exactly. But just nothing in this kind of ilk at the moment. I mean, I've got a couple of ideas that I'd like to do. Just trying to persuade someone to pay me to do them. Is
okay, if anyone's listening, well, we'll keep an eye on you, and in the meantime, thank you so much for dropping into the book bag. It's been great talking to you.
Cheers.
That's it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed my session with Travis. He's very good value. I hope you did tap subscribe. We love new subscribers. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.